All right, in this video, I'm going to go over how I do some research when I find a grave or a headstone and I can't quite read it, or I can't read it at all, and how I try to research, see who it belonged to, who it was, and other information. So, just to get started here, that's not a very good picture. So, this is a video that I made of a headstone that I'm trying to decipher, and it's broken. If I go over here, you can see this top part here. I dug all over. I can't find any of these pieces here. And it's possible that when that was broke, people mowing could have picked those pieces up and just threw them out into the cornfield or did whatever with them. Typically, when they fall over, the pieces are laying there and they end up getting buried. So this was buried under the sod, I'd say just 2-3 inches below the ground. What I did, I actually brought this home because it's small. I don't want nobody walking off with it, although I walked off with it, but I'm going to take it back. I'm going to build a base for it and then mount it and stand it upright. So one thing I already determined, I probably can't get this top to fit on there unless I filled all this in with some type of mortar or something. And I don't want to do that, but I think there's some inscription up here that's missing. So what this part says, I'm pretty sure this says daughter, abbreviation for daughter of, and I'm pretty sure that says PJ, and then there's a letter here, it might be C, and I'm pretty sure that says Harmon, and died September 4, 1861, age 1 year, 4 months, 20 days. And what I can't read is this inscription down here. So what I did to try to make this more legible is that I wetted it and then I put wet sand on it, and then I took a piece of cardboard. And then I used this little piece of cardboard to scrape off the extra sand, and it just leaves the sand inside the inscription there. So I'm pretty sure that says daughter of PJ plus, I think, letter C, Harmon. I'll move this along so you kind of see how I do that. It really helps. And then I'll go a little farther. And then once I stare at that for 20 minutes and can't read it, I take a sponge. Here's a real close up. See, this makes the J kind of stand out, in my opinion. And so I take that sponge. Here I take the sponge. All right, so I take the sponge and I kind of get off a little more gently, try to get it to stand out. And at some point, you take too much sand off, then it gets to the point where you can't see anything. I'll show you what I mean here. So I go over it again. So now I start removing more sand. The first thing I usually do, and I'll be at the cemetery, and I can do this at the cemetery. I bring this up on my phone, and I come down and I say, okay, I think that says Harmon. So I come down to the H, Harmon, and I only see a couple Harmons here, Walter, Francis, and Zuba Harmon. And I could do a search because there's other Harmons and they're by marriage, so there might be a Harmon listed as wife or something. But I didn't find this Harmon. And then the date on there, September 4, at first I thought that was a 1, 1861 is what that says. So I did a search for that date, and then up here, so these are the cemetery records that some genealogists did years ago. So they did their best. They have Darman, and then they say Ida Mae Darman, 4 years old, 4 September 1861, daughter of C and J.R. Darman. So the mistakes I think that have been made, they should say Harmon. I'm guessing this might be right, but I'm not sure about this. definitely not the Darman. So what I'm going to do now is assume that her name's Harmon and a daughter here. So some other hints I looked at these other Harmon, a lot of family, small community, a lot of family buried there. So this Walter Harmon, 67 years old, I figured he might be the grandpa, perhaps, based on the dates. He died shortly after Ida May. And let me bring up the web here. All right, before I get too far ahead of myself. So this is the map of the cemetery. And I found that headstone right here. If you look at this, it says P.J. Harmon, not Darman. So that makes me think it's definitely Harmon and not Darman. And the grave is probably, these corners aren't marked, so there's 6 graves per lot. And I'm not exactly sure which one she's buried at, but it's in here. So I'm going with Harmon, 99% Harmon. And PJ, I have no idea who PJ Harmon is. Is that Paul, John, or whatever? So what I did, I went to, since I have Walter's name, Walter Harmon, I went to Ancestry, and let's bring up some tabs here. Okay, so first of all, I brought up Ancestry, and let's scroll out a little bit. And I did a search, and I found Walter Harmon, and it's the right Walter Harmon. If I right click, open a new link, and scroll down, burial, Round Grove, Illinois. So FamilySearch is a free website. It's ran by the LDS Church. There's no scams, no hidden costs, no nothing. It's totally 100% free. The only thing that might cost money is it might lead to a link to a source that you go down, and then that source might require a subscription. But they use it as a source, not as a way to get you to buy something. So anyhow, buried in Round Grove. So the right Walter. All right, let's close that tab. Go back here. So there's Walter Harmon, married to this. There was that other name on that Excel spreadsheet. Let's bring that up real quick again. So that must be Mrs. Harmon. All right, so got the right person. So if I look at the children, I see Peter Joseph Harmon. So this is where I'm thinking Peter Joseph was the father of Ida May Harmon. And I'm speculating here because there's no other children. Now, this isn't means that this is 100% accurate. People make mistakes about FamilySearch. Anybody can go in there and add things and do things. So there are mistakes. There's people who are just stubborn and they think they know and they go and they change things. But then there's other people that have official sources like death records, death certificates, and then it's verified by a headstone and obituary. So they have 10 sources saying this is what happened, but there's some stubborn old lady who says, my grandma said that Aunt Nelda was born in 1862, not 1863, and then goes in here and changes things based on what somebody's deceased grandma or aunt said. So anyhow, Walter Harmon, I'm thinking Peter Joseph Harmon. So the thing about this is that they also had a daughter named Mary who married Ira Heath, and they had a child called George Walter Heath who married Electa Whiteside Fellows. So just pop this tab open real quick. So there's Electra Whiteside Fellows. If you look at her parents, it's Simon and Elizabeth. Oh, interesting. So then if I click on the children here, Edward, that's my great-grandfather. So Simon's my great-great-grandfather. Simon and Edward are both buried in Round Grove Cemetery. So at the time when I found that little headstone and dug it up and was working on it, I had no idea that through marriage, I have a connection to that person. If I had to guess, through marriages, I'm probably related to cousins or something, maybe 50 people in the cemetery. I got 2 ancestors, more than 2 ancestors, great grandfathers, 2 of them, and then a great grandfather buried there. Through marriages and shirt tail connections and everything like that, you might say maybe like a third or half these people I have a connection to. So anybody named Heath, I have a connection to. Anybody by the name Bacon, Harmon, Armstrong, I have some type of connection to them. This was just to show that I have a connection to this person. Let's go back to here to Walter, and then let's look at Peter or Porter Joseph. Go to the person view here. I can get some more information. And so he ended up in South Dakota at some point. If I look at the census records, let's look at sources here. If I look at records here, these are the sources of proves who he is. So he shows up here in town records in Massachusetts. Looks like he showed up in a marriage record, so perhaps he was married in Massachusetts, 1840. 1850, he was in Whiteside County in 1850. All right, so at some point he came to Whiteside County, and then 1860, he would still be in Whiteside County because that's where the daughter died. So he was in Hopkins Township, which is, he moved away from Round Grove at that point. Round Grove's in Mount Pleasant. So 1880 census, so let's see where he's at there. So he is still in Whiteside County in 1880, but he died in South Dakota. So find a grave, he's buried in South Dakota. Let's expand that. He's buried in Mount Pleasant Township, South Dakota. Not to be confused with Mount Pleasant Township, Whiteside County, Illinois. So we're talking about two Mount Pleasant townships here. Now, it could have been that the people from Mount Pleasant Township and Whiteside County went to South Dakota and then named that township Mount Pleasant after Whiteside County. That's very possible. In fact, I bet you there's a 95% chance that happened, but I'm not going to research that today. So anyhow, let's see. So let's see what I got here for Walter Harmon. So Walter Harmon, I went to ancestry.com, which is subscription based, and I do pay for a subscription. Some stuff you get for free, other stuff you don't get for free. But I went there to try to verify some things, and it's a lot of the same stuff that's on FamilySearch. Let's see what I was looking at for this tab. Some events for Walter Harmon. He also came to Whiteside County, so he was the father of Porter Joseph. So what I'm trying to find out about is children. Did he actually go to details here? And if I scroll down, parents and siblings, Walter. So children, they have 3 children listed. Emma, looks like, was he married twice? Looks like he was married twice to Jane Hubbard. They had 1 child, and then maybe he got married again to Rebecca Armstrong. There's those Armstrongs again. And then they had these children. So Ida May died, I'm getting confused here. And of course, 1861. So that means she was born about 1857, about 4 years, 4 months. So she was born about 1857. I didn't do the math. So she was born, Ida May is a child born in between here somewhere. I'd have to look at the dates more closely. So mistakes are made. Who's to know if these dates are exact? They probably are, but could be. So the other thing, if I look at the 1860 census, so if she was born 1857, died 1861, if they did the census in 1860, she was probably alive. So am I on the Porter Joseph person? Thanks for sticking with me if you're still with me. And 1860 census, if I expand that out, sometimes I say other people in this record. So 1860, there's Adeline, Eveline, if I'm saying that right, Walter. There's a person who's 19 years old, and a female that's 16 years old. So could be farmhands, or could be family that came along, or perhaps sister of a spouse or something. That's Rebecca. So I would have thought that Ida May would show up in the 1860 census here somewhere. So I could just search the 1860 census for Ida May Harmon also. So I'm not finding Ida May in here, although I'm pretty sure I'm probably right, but not enough. I'm not sure enough to say, yes, I'm positively right. So I could do some more research. So this is Ancestry, a timeline of Walter. Here is Porter Joseph Finegrave. So this is in Mount Pleasant Township in South Dakota. And a lot of times Finegrave will have links to children's headstones. It doesn't have one for Ida May. Sometimes you click on another sibling, and then under their siblings they'll have, but nothing there. And let's see what else I got. So this is Finegrave Everybody in Round Grove, and I went down to Harmon's. This little headstone does not show up on the Finegrave website, probably because it was buried and nobody even knew it was there. So Finegrave's been around for 20 plus years. So for 20 plus years, people who have gone through there and do the Finegrave stuff, find pictures and or take pictures and upload them, never been documented. So I'll do that when I get the headstone propped up. So you can create an account on Finegrave and submit pictures. They usually takes a couple days for them to get verified by volunteers to make sure people aren't uploading dumb things. So one that I just upload, oh, it's right here, Sarah Green. So this one was buried. I fixed it. I propped it up. I cleaned it up, and I uploaded it. So I don't, it says submitted by me right here. So this was the original picture that was on there. At some point this was standing up, then it got tipped over, and then I should zoom into it a little better so you can read the inscription better. Crop it and redo it and upload it again. So anyhow, what does all this prove? It just shows how I go through and do some of the research to try to figure out who's who, what I'm finding. And it could be quite called a rabbit hole. You go down these holes and you go down another hole, and it's burrows and tunnels, and you end up never finding the rabbit, basically, I guess you might say. Some people call it a rat hole, but I like rabbits better than rats. That's how I do some of my research. I'm still not convinced when I say this one here for who I think is Ida Harmon. I'm 99% sure this is her name and got the dates, but and I'm 80% sure daughter of Porter Joseph Harmon, but I wish I could find some better documentation and proof. All right, I'll wrap that up. If you watched this whole video, I appreciate it. If not, if you got bored, I understand. So that's all.